Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Corner Blue. I'm Andres Rico, and I'm here with Hugo Alvarado. This is episode 78, and we're here to break down what I think is a pretty lackluster performance for Copa Oro 2025. I think there's a consensus out there of the disappointment at the performance, but we're here to break down what went on, any positive points to it, and then what looms ahead. But before that, Hugo, how are you doing, man?
Great. Recovering after a interesting Gold Cup for us, and looking forward to what's next. I think the important games are coming up in September.
Yeah, I think the stakes are even higher as we see or can draw more conclusions from the last 5 games that La Selecta has played in the course of weeks. Unfortunately, I feel like there's more doubts, more questions raised, and a lot of work to be done with little time. We saw I saw in the flesh a lackluster performance against Curaçao, where we saw El Bolillo kind of opt for playing long balls to Brian Hill, staying compact defensively, and that resulted in a 0-0 draw against Curaçao. Did you have any observations of that match?
Well, what I got out of that match, and this was, I almost want to say that it was clarified after Curaçao played Honduras, where I think that game, the Curaçao against Honduras game, kind of gave Bolillo the I had given it the benefit of the doubt in terms of I knew the team could do more if they wanted to play more loosely and more open and attack a little more, but I thought that the team wanted to play in the way they did. And, Bolillo said that sometimes, against teams that have a lot of European-based players, you can't just open up because they're going to kill you. And we saw a little bit of that when we played Suriname in the qualifiers. So it was definitely not a pretty game. It was not, and I can see why the fans were disappointed. But I think if you look at it from the perspective that if we can really manage to play like that 90 minutes and we go to Panama, or we go to Guate or even Suriname, and we manage to close everything, park the bus, and manage to get a point out of in the visiting matches, I'm not necessarily against that. Again, I'm not saying it was pretty, but if we take that if there was a test of something we can potentially do against teams like Panama when we visit them, I'm in. I think that we're 6 potential games away from a World Cup, and every point is going to be necessary. Now, it is important that at home we do something different, and I think that I feel like we got to see a little bit of that against Honduras. I think we got to see that this team is able to play differently, and what we saw against Curaçao was actually how the coach wanted the team to play. I mean, that's in a nutshell. That's what I saw.
Yeah, I noticed just kind of the usual issues coming up in the midfield with the connectivity between Cartagena and Landaverde. Harold is still, I feel, getting into a rhythm of things with international ball, considering where he plays his club ball. I also noticed that the pitch was slippery, like players were slipping very frequently throughout the match. Just an observation, not an excuse. I think we got lucky on the right side where Curaçao was pressuring throughout the game, and they weren't able to break through. But I saw Tamaka struggling on that flank. He also got injured that match and ultimately would not be able to finish all three games. So that match, it was just interesting to see the Hail Marys, the long balls, putting pressure on Brian to make those runs and try and get behind the center backs for Curaçao. It was a sleeper. I feel like it was a stalemate. The fans were very upset at PayPal Park, booing at the end of the match, if you can believe it. And it was just an interesting energy of hearing a fan base in the U.S. booing almost as much as the fans were booing in El Cusca when they tied Suriname to make it through to the next round. And I feel like that kind of negative energy permeated throughout. You mentioned the switch or the contrast between how they played Curaçao and Honduras. I think it helped that Enrico was able to play as a starter, and you could see him and Harold starting to get to know each other because, again, a lot of these young guys, especially the ones that are playing abroad, can't be part of the microciclos, and sometimes whether it's been for injury or for one reason or for another, they haven't, and also coaches' decisions, they haven't coincided that much. So we haven't gotten to see Harold playing off of Enrico and Ordaz and Brian Hill, and I think that those four players with more time together, I think could be a formidable attack. But just due to circumstances, not even in the Gold Cup, we got to see them play that much. But it was interesting to see Harold and Enrico start to play off of each other. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to have possession to attack Honduras, and we ended up losing 2-0 that match. Now we can move on to Canada or Canada if you want. Hugo. I think it was basically kind of like the Curaçao match in the sense that it was more defensively focused, yet we saw a more physical approach that worked for the first half hour. What are your sensations of that match?
I think it's kind of hard to analyze a match with so many incidents. I think that when two of your players get red carded so quickly, you kind of just lose the whole match. I mean, at that point, you just playing to make sure that you didn't get destroyed. From that perspective, it wasn't bad, considering that Honduras lost 6-0 to Canada. I think it was already a very difficult match for us, at least to try to score a goal with 11 players. So once we were down to 9 players, I think at that point we just, all we could do was hope for the best. And yeah, there isn't much. I mean, some of the things I observe is that that game that we try to do against Curaçao, where we try to play long balls to Brian Hill, which a lot of people may see it as we're only playing al pelotazo, but it is actually a way of playing that coaches sometimes implement. Doniga used to do the same thing, where you purposely try to pull the other team out. And try to surprise them with a long ball. I think what happened going back to the Curaçao game, it's just that our crosses were not good. We just didn't have any good crosses. We couldn't connect any good crosses with Brian Hill. So probably the idea was there, but we were not.
The passes were forced. They were precipitated because
Yeah.
Curaçao did do a good job of clogging up the midfield. Like I mentioned, like Cartagena and Landaverde and Harold were having a hard time stringing like two, three passes in the buildup. So it felt like if we'd get a counter, we were almost sending it from like almost our defensive zone or the midfield rather than
Yeah.
crossing the line and then making, a through ball or a Hail Mary in that sense. But it just felt like the passes were done too early and forced and it would allow the center backs to set up in a sense.
Yeah, we didn't have a good quality pass to Brian. Um, Trying to think other than no, we didn't. I mean, I'm trying to remember if that was the game where Enrico sent that long pass to
No,
Brian
that
that almost ended up in the goal. That was
that was
Honduras,
against
right?
Honduras that he sent,
Yeah,
but there was a buildup there. There was a timing to it, and then unfortunately, Brian just wasn't able to tap it over the Catracho keeper. So there was a contrast in execution, also because of the personnel, I think, in a sense as well. The Canada match, I in retrospect now you can understand that Evolio was looking out for cards, because the red cards and then ultimately yellow cards and ultimately red cards carry over into the qualifiers. And so it seemed like he wanted to reserve some of the pieces so that they wouldn't get suspended for the opener against Wate in September. And it was a throwback performance of La Selecta, for better, for worse. I say for more, for worse, in the sense that there was a physicality, a grittiness to it, a scrappiness to it that made sense if you were able to contain it and be smart with fouls. And ultimately, the situational awareness got taken over by grit, I think. And just that, one of those situations where you just scratch your head and just reminisce of other moments that have been similar to this match, like El Salvador's UNCAF match against Costa Rica back in, I think it was 2009, where there were plenty of red cards and injuries to try and end a match that was definitely one-sided towards Costa Rica's way. And just to think that Santos Ortiz should have been subbed out. I mean, he was on the ground after suffering an injury for several minutes. I think he got stitches, if I'm not mistaken. He chose to stay in, and he stayed in only to commit an unnecessary foul and get a double yellow, which basically made the team collapse. Then shortly after, Mario comes up with the save on the PK, and then on a dead ball, Jairo Enriquez just lost his cool, ends up elbowing Johnson from Canada and gets a needless red card. And that was the game, basically. I saw a post by a friend of the podcast, Giovanni Zavaleta, an old player from the Azulita that made it to the U20 World Cup, mentioning that he was at the match and he felt an admiration to the grit of the players that, despite being two men down, ran the rest of the match, that they didn't give up a lofty score. And I share a little bit of that with him. I do admire that they were able to pull off a 2-0 score rather than a 6-0, with nine men. I like that they were able to match Canada's physicality, but unfortunately, I feel like it went too far. There was lack of situational awareness that ultimately led to, what happened. I don't know what your stance on that is. I get the scrappiness. I think it's necessary under certain circumstances, but it has to be contained.
yeah. I mean, look, I always made the observation that sometimes, uh, I mean, you have to be smart, right? If you're going to play that way, and our players are already limited physically. We tend to be more on the smaller side. So, on many occasions, when we are trying to take on bigger players, unfortunately, one of the ways that, given the lack of physicality, the overuse of power comes into place. And I think that, at least in Santos' situation, I think that's what happened. I don't think, it was ill intended to do what he did. Jairo's thing was different. I think he just lost it in a unnecessary way. But I mean, sometimes you want to break the game, right? And you have to play like that. But also, you can't get red cards. You just can't. You just ruin the entire game plan. So, um, I mean, I do give it to them for running the 90 minutes with two men less. I mean, I think that that's probably one of the things that we can get out of this Gold Cup, is that, yeah, the team does seem to keep its fitness level, and they keep up longer than what we saw in the past. Um, but yeah, going back to the Canada game, it's just very hard to make something of it. I mean, yeah, if you look at the result, if you focus on the result, it's like, it's not a bad result. We play, considering that we play with 9 men, and
They're the
we lost
favorite
two
to win the
zero.
group.
Yeah, so I guess if we focus on the result, it wasn't bad, but we would never know if the game was executed in the way that the coach wanted, because at the point that two of your players get red carded in the way that our two players did, at that point, I think most of whatever you had planned throughout the week goes out the window.
You're
And
improvising almost.
yeah, and we kind of managed to keep our defensive line pretty solid for most of the game, but we had no attack. We just
Yeah.
couldn't.
I think one thing that stands out of this tournament is we see the emerging of Mauricio Cerritos. I really liked him in the the minutes that he got. He seemed to be pretty solid. He's tall. He has a physical presence on the ball, which is something that we need defensively in the mid. So that was good to see. Some of the minutes that Enrico got playing off of Harold in the Honduras game were positive, but I still wish, we've seen Enrico in the few minutes that he's had since his return. He's played off of Emerson Mauricio well. I feel like in the game against Curaçao, the subs were a little too late, or seeing them play off of each other could have resulted or gone another way. I feel if managed differently time wise. And other than that, the physicality against Canada, I appreciated the first, 20-ish, 30-ish minutes, considering how El Salvador just fared against them in the last qualifying campaign. It was nice to see Canada never being able to get comfortable in the match up until the first red, due to the physicality. And I feel like for the most part, the whole team was able to have a physical presence, except for Diego Flores and Jefferson Valladares. You could see it easily that they were just being bumped off of the Canadian players like they were 12-year-olds. Like it was bad. It was bad. Like I feel like on the flanks was the only place where El Salvador was dominated physically. Everyone else put up a good fight. Emerson Mauricio was getting all up in the Canadians' faces and, not letting them settle in. So in that aspect, just for those 30 minutes, I feel like those are interesting things to see. when you're playing a team like Canada that, is similar to the US, and seeing how Bolillo made certain adjustments with, I feel, less athletic players, but obviously players that had more of a physical presence. And now, Ural, the Gold Cup is over. We have qualifiers starting up in 2 months. You get the sense of urgency, independently of fans' reactions, the press's reaction. You just look at the team in the situation it's in. There's a sense of urgency where it seems like Bolillo has had his time to try and get a group together in 3 months, draw as many conclusions as he can, but they came up really short this Gold Cup, and it seems like now it's crunch time to start looking for other pieces or other solutions. What do you think lies ahead in terms of call-ups leading into September? Like, in my own mind, I've had like these different categories of what call-ups would be, in my head if I were the one at the reins, and I was feeling like dividing it into practical call-ups, players that have had that experience, that have worn the jersey, that have competed at this level, and for whatever reason or another have not had consistent minutes due to, the coaching changes and preferences. But I feel like there's practical call-ups, there's projects looking to the next qualifying round and other tournaments, the risks, and then I feel like there's one outlier. So if you don't mind, I'll go over it with you, and then you can chime in, and if you want to add something, go right ahead. But I was thinking practical call-ups, I think right off the bat would be the Ticos, Climaco, and Cristian Martinez. But I think specifically Cristian Martinez would help a lot in the mid, due to either the inexperience of the players that have been called up by Bolillo, but also I would say the fitness level of some of them as well, the lack of experience. And I feel like Christian has that experience. He showed that he defensively is sound. He's also shown that offensively he can get the build up going from the mid as soon as he recovers the ball. So I feel like his leadership, his handling of the ball, and an all around great midfielder, I feel should be in there. Climaco, obviously, we need options on the left flank with our fullbacks, because Larin is KO, and Diego Flores, I feel, just was exposed physically, on during the last few matches. I'd also call up Pablo Puñed, whether he's a super sub or just gets minutes in the midfield to help that cohesiveness, the connectivity, and the buildup that's lackluster as we've seen it so far. But we have yet to see how he's doing physically since he's coming back from his injury. Then I would say Amando is another candidate to be called up due to the fact that he has a physical presence. He has proven himself in the attack to play off of other players. He's not someone that just absorbs the ball and nothing happens of it. He's proven that he can connect and play off of other players, and we need more players like that. Then I would say, and this is an outlier of the practical call-ups, and I've said it plenty of times, but I think Tomás Granito should be considered, just because of what I've seen in him during his days at FAS, when he's been called up to the national team, just how he can. I think he's the type of player that can put the attack on the shoulder, control the pace, the tempo, and has a physical presence. And he's a cerebral player, and I feel like that's something we need more options in the midfield. And I feel like he brings you something in terms of controlling the tempo, distributing the ball. I just feel like he hasn't had enough opportunities with the last couple of coaching staffs. And I'd say the projects. We've mentioned them before. Alemayehu from Sweden. And then we've seen Gabriel Pereira get called up. Uh, you know, I don't know what their impact, their immediate impact could be. Uro, what do you think in terms of that? Do you think those are projects or prospects, or do you think players like that could immediately be inserted into a lineup and have an effect?
I think the first players that you mentioned, I think they can definitely be put in and have an impact. Martinez has 38 international matches. Climaco has 10 international matches with El Salvador. They are physically built. They're bigger than what we currently have on those positions, and they play in a league that it's at least one step above our league, at least, if not two. Um, yeah, I basically I agree with a lot of the names that you mentioned. Um, I always like Amando. I think that he brings a lot to the table. He can play in the middle. He can play in the left. He can play in the right. He's a player that knows how to play without the ball. He knows how to make the right moves. He's a very smart player, in my opinion. He's a player who receives a lot of fouls near the box, because he is very good with the way that he positions himself and how he uses his body. He's pretty strong, so if he's taken down, it's because he's taken down with a foul usually. Um, then in terms of Granito, yeah, I don't know why he's never, throughout the different coaches, he's never really had a good opportunity. And I think we all kind of stay with what we saw of him with that U20 back in 2013, and we saw his potential. And yes, he does bring a level of physicality, with size to the midfield, which can also be very, very helpful. I like how he controls the tempo of the games. I like that he has a really good long range shot. He has really good long passes. I just think that maybe he's been under the shadow of like the Narciso Orellana, who's been a solid player in that position. Um, the Cartagena, it seems like he's been there with the last two coaches that we had. Um, but I do, yeah, I agree that he I would like to see more of him. I don't know if that's going to happen, just considering that he hasn't been called up much at all. Um, and then in terms of prospects, I can't say much about Gabriel Pereira de Acevedo because he plays at the U20 level. Yes, it's Brazil. But I definitely think he's a project player, but I don't know if I can say that he is a player that can be inserted into the mix and have an immediate impact. I don't know.
Yeah, I have no
Yeah,
idea. I mean, all I can base it is off of what I've read. I have not seen the player play, but it seems that yes, that there's a hype around him for the future, it seems.
yeah,
But what about Alemayehu? Like, I haven't seen him play. I've seen, clips most recently of him scoring against Chelsea and other matches. Do you think that is someone that can be inserted into the squad for the
definitely.
next qualifiers?
Well, let's clarify. When I say definitely, I mean that I think that if we could get him, I mean that would be probably one of our biggest acquisitions, right? But he's a player who's been there in the mix of the Swedish national team. But in terms of if we could get him, I think that he can definitely have an impact, and I think he can contribute immediately to the national team. Just because he's a big guy with amazing ball control. He's very smart with the ball. He knows how to hold the ball. He knows how to defend because of his physicality. He's an 18-year-old, but with a bright future. And it would be amazing if we could get him. But we have yet to see if that's possible. But I do think that he can play as a 10, he can play as an 8, as a box to box player, and he definitely has the speed to do that. And he can play on the right and the left. I mean, he's just an overall very versatile player who can really help. I mean, he's 18, but he already has about 10 games at first division in Sweden, plus the games that he had in the Netherlands at U21, plus the games that he's had internationally with Sweden. Yes, he still has room for growth, but I think that he can definitely help us out. Yeah.
All right, and then in terms of risks, I had a category of risky call-ups in the sense that I don't see I see that there's more risks to them being included performance-wise than if they were to not be called up for various reasons. But I would say there's a potential for them being called up, I feel, but one that has been mentioned and comes to mind would possibly be Mayerhil. He's still playing in Colombia, but has been left out of the squad for the last few months. Another prospect would be Josh Perez, who has made the move to Poland and is playing his club football out there. Also has been missing from the squad for a significant period of time. Another player would be Herman Fuentes, who has been left out of the squad since his pass to the backup keeper that ended up in disaster. And then I'd say I would add to this list Eric Zavaleta as well. I know there's been still interest in whether or not he would be willing to tend to a call up. But I think one fact that is inevitable is, his lack of minutes. So his fitness would come into question as to what he could contribute. And then I feel like the complete outlier here is the enigmatic situation with Alex Roldan. So, Hugo, what do you think about this category of what I deemed the risks?
Well, I think that we should continue fighting, and fighting or insisting on having the best players we can possibly get, and Roldan and Zabaleta are there. That's just my opinion. I think that yes, we have to see how Zabaleta is doing, but he's a player that even when he wasn't getting a whole lot of minutes with the Galaxy, he came to the national team and he had an impact. And I always said that we don't have a center back like him, a center back who is a threat on set plays, a center back who played his first years as a forward, who knows how to score goals. We don't have that right now. So I think that alone, I would love to have him in the team. That's just it. And the same with Roldan. I mean, a player who can play as a right back, as a left back, as a defensive midfielder, as a goalkeeper, and as a center back.
Yeah, no, I mean, to add to the list.
I mean, he just plays center back over the weekend. He's just an overall amazing player. It'd be great to have him back. Hopefully, we can get him back. However, whatever that might look like or whatever it takes, I just think that we're not in a position to not go for more players, considering that we are 6 games away from a potential World Cup. Josh, I always like Josh. I think that what's affected Josh is the lack of stability club-wise. But I think that I like what I've seen of him. I like how he plays on the right side.
Cutting in with the
Um,
left.
yeah, and he's just a very skilled player on the 1v1. He creates a lot. Um, Fortunately, there's the lack of time, the lack of FIFA windows. But I think, and what I heard, Herman Fuentes was a player that, previous coaching staff have liked. It's just that they haven't found the opportunity to, incorporate him into the national team. I think that it would be worth, if possible, to take a look at him because because he's a center back. I think we need more players in the center back position because he's 6'3", so he brings more height to the team, which we're going to need against teams like Suriname and Panama. So, I mean, in an ideal world, if we had FIFA windows, I think that all of the players that you
In like three
mentioned would
more
be worth.
years.
Yeah, it'll be worth checking out. But there's definitely some that we know that if they come in, well, I think that they could help us immediately.
Yeah, and as we pretty much expected, the moment that the Doniga tenure was ended and Bolillo was brought in March, that this would be a race against the clock in ways that we haven't seen recently. Is it the ideal situation? No. Is it the ideal way of handling a qualifying campaign? God, no. But at this point, I feel like, you know, um, since the last five matches weren't able to be used to bring all the pieces in together and find like a stable core. At this point, yeah, you have to do this improv cramming of a casting, and you'd hope that the pool is expanded rather than contracted because, as we mentioned here, with the 40-man list given before the last five matches, it just something seemed off, and so I'm hoping that you know the pool expands beyond those 40 and that there's a more realistic call up with more obviously a more sense of urgency. And it will be interesting to see now if there's this better balance of bringing in pieces that will perform, that need to be there, that will play to El Bolillo's system or his tactics depending on the match, rather than, I wouldn't say being complacent, looking solely or mostly at the domestic base players, but I feel like you have to expand it a little bit more because the last five matches just show like we're lacking, we're lacking. And just to close off really quick, we're seeing the emergence of Guatemala. We've seen what they've been able to build after being suspended by FIFA. We've seen them in the friendly matches. You've seen them up close and personal, and the emergence of what they've been doing. What thoughts do you have based off of that, and how does that compare with what we're doing? Because it seems night and day.
Well, I've always stood by the thought that we're very similar. We're two very similar teams. I mean, we tied in Chattanooga. However, the momentum that they're gonna come out of this Gold Cup, it's definitely something to keep in mind and not ignore. It helps you a lot. I mean, it's just qualifying to a semifinal. Guatemala has been working with the same base of players for a long time, and that has its benefits with the same coach. They've incorporated some foreign-based players that have worked out. And Tena has he's taken the risk. I mean, if you look at Olger, I think, I don't know, Olger Escobar, I might be pronouncing his first name incorrectly. He has yet to play an MLS game. He's played MLS Next Pro, and he's a guy who started against Canada. Ordonez is a similar case. He maybe he had a few minutes in MLS, and then he was playing in Moldova, not necessarily the strongest league, but he's there. Rubio Rubin, he's playing USL Championship. Look at the amazing goal he's just scored on Canada. So, Guatemala is showing us that we cannot ignore players that play in leagues, even if they're USL leagues.
Or you can go winless in a year and still survive it.
Right. Right. Hugo tried, and the pressure was just so big, but I'm not against it. I think it's Guatemala is showing that the formula of consistency and work and a mix of local league players and foreign-based players can work. But it takes time, and they've had the time, and they've had the friendly matches. They play a lot of friendly matches, and that helps you. So, yes, definitely they have a more cohesive team who knows each other really well. They have players who play. I don't know. I don't have the numbers, but I'm sure there's. Sarabia has been in that team for so long. He's not a starter recently, but they have a solid base of players, and it's showing right now.
Yeah, I think if anything with this emergence, it just emphasizes that I think they're the team to beat if we are to, compete for the second place. Obviously, the aim needs to be to win the group. But, with the level of Panama and now, this inertia that Guatemala is going to be carrying in, the experience gained, the unity, the team chemistry that they're going to be riding off of, it's going to be a battle. And so, yeah, I just hope, and then on our end, we're still trying to figure out what are the pieces that can fit into this puzzle. So I feel like it feels like they're light years ahead of us in a sense, but at the same time, you can't get too pessimistic. It's not like we're calling, or it's not like Bodio's going to call a completely new set of players with zero experience to start off this new round of qualifying. I just think it's this very difficult task of getting the right pieces to the puzzle, and I'm just hoping that it pans out. And so with that, I think we're going to close this off. We appreciate you checking the podcast out. Thanks to everyone that commiserated during the matches during the Gold Cup. It's definitely a completely different experience when you're able to interact with fellow fans when things are going well, when they're going bad, than just sinking into your couch after a match against Canada like that. So in any case, Ul, do you want to say anything else before we close out?
No, just looking forward to the qualifiers. Looking forward to maybe making it to at least one game. I don't know. We'll see what the future holds. But,
yeah, I'm definitely eyeing October. That would be amazing.
Yeah, and look, in soccer, football, anything can happen. You talked about Guatemala and how well they're doing. Well, who would have thought that Honduras was going to kick Panama out of the Gold Cup? Nobody thought that would happen, and it happened. With Panama being, in many ways, the better team. But I think anything can happen, and I think I think we can put up a fight. I'm not pessimistic. I know that a lot of people are feeling disappointed about our last performance, but I think that, if anything, I think what you said, that the first game against Guatemala is key. It is for many reasons, and even more now because even if they don't go to the final, you know, right now we know that the perception is that Guatemala is doing really well. So if we manage to get a good result on the opening game against Guatemala, I think that would really help our self esteem, and the players can start believing that everything is possible.
Yes, I mean, again, the speed bumps or the obstacles to getting to the World Cup are Panama, Guatemala, and Suriname. I don't feel like that's a tall order. I feel like the tall order is just, can we not get in our own way? And we've figured out how to do that over and over and over again. So can we, in the span of 6 months, no, actually, yeah, 5 months, not get in our own way, and I think that's what we're going to see the next couple of months in the next qualifying round. So time to fasten your seatbelts. And with that, thanks again. I wrote a Substack, so you can find the link on Twitter or on Instagram for it. It's free. I'm not charging you to read, what I'm typing up as I process what the Gold Cup was, but I break it down a little bit my own way there. So please feel free to check it out. And in the meantime, Godspeed to everybody. Take it easy, and we'll see you closer around qualifying time in September. So if there's news, we'll record. If not, I think you'll be hearing from us around September. All right. Have a good one.